Hi mer friends, my name is Justine, I'm the Mermaid Seamstress, and today I will be reviewing my new Fantasy One fin by Mertailor. Look at this stuff, isn't it neat? Now you can say my collection's complete. So a couple weeks ago, I went to Mermagic Con and I had a blast, and one of the things I did was spend a lot of time in the vendor hall with Nerdmaid Faith, and we happened to come across the Mertailor booth. Both of us were super duper excited, and I just kept looking at the Mertailor booth, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, I don't need it. I really don't need it. I don't need it. And then he was like, well, they're on sale. And I was like, I need it. So I got myself the Fantasy One, or I guess it's just called the Fantasy Fin, the original one by Mertailor. It was one of the ones he had in stock, and I got to go with it the Water Lily Whimsy tail, which it was mostly the tail that made me want to get the Fantasy One. As you guys know, I really like my fantasy fins. They're so comfortable, and they are really, like, what they lack in power, they make up for in grace. So I did get this beautiful fin, which you can see the swim video of. It came out last week, and I will have that linked above. But with it, I decided to go ahead and get the Fantasy to go with it. And oh my gosh, you guys, so when this fin first came out, I had a lot of mixed feelings about it because I wasn't sure if I liked the way that it folded in on itself when it swam, and it took me a really long time to kind of justify if I wanted a fantasy fin at all. And then about 2 years ago now, I got a Fantasy 2 for Christmas, and I fell in love with the feel of it, the way it swims, and then I decided to invest in the Fantasy 3, and that has become my all-time favorite tail to swim in a pool. Like, hands down, absolutely. Like, if I am not looking for power, if I'm looking for comfort, if I am looking for grace, and I am looking for just anything other than power and agility, that's the fin I go for. When it was on sale, when it was at the Mertailor booth and I could like see it in person and try it on, I decided to go ahead and grab a Fantasy One, and I am not disappointed about it. A couple of things about the Fantasy One. I got this beautiful black, I believe it's called black pearl. It does have glitter embedded in it. This one is a size large. I decided, so in the Fantasy 2, I have a large, and it's just slightly, like, I can swim out of it if I move the wrong way, and if I only have the fin on, if I don't have a tail skin over it. My Fantasy 3 is a medium, and that fits more snugly, but not in a way that's uncomfortable or that isn't easy to pull on. It's still very easy to pull on. So I decided to go ahead and just go with the large, mostly because this is the color I liked best out of the stock options he had available. The first things first is that these, at normal price, the Fantasy One fins cost $150 because they are a full silicone fin, and they are beautiful. I mean, if you look at all of that depth and detail in the sculpt, it is absolutely gorgeous. It's the same, type of effort and energy, even in the scales at the top, that would be put into one of his silicone fins, I'm assuming. The back is the same amount of depth. You can see how floppy this fin is. Like the other Fantasy fins, it is incredibly floppy, and it is floppy up to this point. So, which means that it has a smaller, like, stiffness surface area, than both of the other monofins, both the Fantasy 2 and the Fantasy 3. And there are some advantages to that. So the biggest advantage of this fin is that I had to take it home in my suitcase, and I did that by folding it like this. So I believe his name was Blue. I don't remember exactly, but he was at the Mertailor booth. He's he works for Eric, and he taught me how to fold this. If I need to fold it, you're not really supposed to fold it, but what he said was the back is stronger, so fold the fins over the back and put a towel or something like in this gap to keep these from squishing flat and cracking the silicone. So it folds down. If you need it to fold down, like to take it to the pool or put it in a backpack, like that's only slightly bigger than my head. That's pretty small for a monofin especially compared to the Fantasy 3. That thing is a beast. But yeah, you can fold it up and carry it like this. This fin is only about 8 pounds compared to 22 pounds, which is what I measured my Fantasy 3 at, and like something like 15 to 18, like my Fantasy 2. So this is comparably very lightweight, still heavier than the Luna. I'm not sure how that happened, but the Finis Luna is the only other silicone monofin that I know is out there that's kind of comparable in size. And that's probably closer to 4 to 6 pounds. Don't quote me on that, but that's what it feels like to me. So the advantages of this fin are that it is super floppy. It is gorgeously sculpted. Compared to the Fantasy 2, this edge, the way, both the thickness of it and the way that the sculpting works, because it goes in and out, these thicker parts are not as weak as they are on the Fantasy 2, which means that this fin is a tiny bit more durable. It is still silicone though, so you do have to treat it carefully and store it flat as much as possible. The insides of the heels are still reinforced, or I should say are reinforced from the original with power mesh. So there is a reinforcement in the heels. He does recommend though in his care sheets never to pull on the heels to try and get it on. You should try, the best thing that I found is to get your feet wet and to get the inside of the monofin wet and push your foot as far in as you can, and then try like very gently to just pop the heels over, because this is probably the weakest part of the fin. So in terms of how it swims, I was very lucky in that I could put it through its paces right away. While at Mermagic Con, I took the Singapore Mermaids Grace in Slow Motion class, which was awesome. And we did a whole bunch of different mermaid tricks and graceful slow motion things. And I thought, wow, this fin is perfect for that. So I wore this fin with the Whimsy tail that I got. And if you want to see a review on the Whimsy tail, it's basically the same quality as my Moonwolf Whimsy tail. So I will link the Whimsy tail review up in the description, or up in the cards and in the description box below. So this fin did exactly what I hoped it would do. It moves beautifully in the water, and the movement does change a little bit in the skin. It's more likely to do a back and forth motion rather than an in and out motion. I don't mind the in and out motion as much now, and especially in a tail skin, it really doesn't offend me as much as it did when I first saw it. And I think that's partially because I've gotten used to the way my Fantasy 3 moves and the way my Fantasy 2 moves in the water. I think I've just gotten over it. And also, I just love the way they feel. So I'm really not mad at it at all. But this fin, compared to the Fantasy 3, is a lot more agile because of its size. So it is still quite wide. I believe the website says it's about 27 inches wide and 22 inches long, which makes it a really good proportion tail, even for somebody as much as big as I am. I was worried that it would be a little bit small in terms of proportions. I have a rule that I go by, just for me personally. I like my flukes to be at least as wide, if not wider than my shoulders, just to get a nice kind of hourglass shape and a balance with my mermaid tails. If the fin is much smaller, it kind of looks a little bit strange. So it just doesn't help with the proportions. So this wins my proportion test, and it moves so beautifully. Like, the flow you get, there's basically no resistance. So when you're doing backflips and things and twists and turns, it's just gonna flow right along with you, and any resistance that you would get normally in those moves, it's just gonna bend out of the way. That being said, that means that it doesn't have the greatest propulsion, which is something that I knew and expected going into this fin. Just based on what I know about the Fantasy 3 and the Fantasy 2, this has even less propulsion than those fins. I would say that from my experience, this has about as much as propulsion as the Finis foil, which is a very soft rubber monofin that's very small. So what I would say is, if you're going out in the ocean with this, if you're going in any sort of open water, or you want to be fast in this fin, this is not the fin for you, unfortunately. If you are looking for something that moves super gracefully underwater, that you can pose in on land, because this is so light, it's actually really easy to maneuver dry. So this is great for dry land photo shoots, I think, personally, just because of the way it moves and the weight of it. It's not something that's like super hard to drag around by yourself like the Fantasy 3 is, just because of how light it is. If you look at the fin by itself, if you're going to use the fin by itself, it still looks great. Like, it looks great in a whimsy tail skin, but it also looks great just by itself, just with the dimension it has and the movement it has. The only thing I would say that is a little bit disappointing, which is disappointing on all of my fins and kind of ruins the aesthetic for me, but I understand why it has it, is the lettering. So it is raised lettering. You can't really see it in a whimsy tail because they're so thick, but if you're gonna put any other type of tail skin on this that's just regular vinyl, you will unfortunately see this probably through the fabric, especially when you're out of the water and the fabric is clinging to it. So that's kind of my only downside in terms of the aesthetic. Again, like, this is a really beautiful monofin and is great for people who are looking for a more aesthetic monofin, one that flows really well in the water, one that is comfortable on their feet. There's no pressure, hardly any pressure on your feet or ankles in this fin. So if you're somebody who really values the comfort of a fin, or needs a fin that is very forgiving, this is definitely the fin for you. I know that this shape is now the same one that they're using, slightly scaled down, but a very similar one to the one that they're using for their new kids fantasy fins. And the kids fantasy fins are really beautiful as well. So that is my review of the Mertailor Fantasea Fin Original. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below. And this video was brought to you by my amazing supporters over on Patreon. If you want to support me, you can support me for as little as $1 a month. Actually, guys, that's a really great deal, and you get special behind the scenes access to new projects that I'm doing, and sneak peeks, and all kinds of awesome content that you can watch over there. Just go to patreon.com/themermaidseamstress to sign up. This video is also brought to you by shopvancouvermermaid.com. I am now an affiliate for shopvancouvermermaid.com, and there is a top there that would go perfectly with this tail. So go ahead and go over to shopvancouvermermaid.com/themermaidseamstress to get all kinds of awesome mermaid tops, leggings, dresses, ebooks on how to make your own mermaid tail. Anything mermaid that you need, head over to shopvancouvermermaid.com and use code mermaidseamstress at checkout for 10% off. And I will see you all next week where I compare the Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you fishes later. Bye, fish friends.